Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today I speak to you with a heavy heart. Hearing the news coming from Morocco, from Libya, thousands of people lost in these calamities. It seems sometimes as though suffering never ends. In April, for example, fighting erupted in Sudan. The ancient city of Khartoum, ravaged by violence, her people caught in crossfire. Khartoum, a city I have visited in happier times. I remember a city with great beauty, situated on the confluence of the two Niles, the white and the blue. I remember a city full of generous, welcoming, and educated people. I remember the campus of its oldest of many universities, the University of Khartoum. Unfortunately, this campus is now indefinitely closed, along with all other universities in Sudan. And earlier this year, students were forced to hide from fighting on that campus. At least one young man was killed, and his body is buried there. Ladies and gentlemen, university should be a cradle of learning. It should be a place of joy, a place where young people gather and discover their purpose. It should be a place where dreams are realized, not destroyed. University should never be a tomb. When I spoke a year ago, Ukraine was filling the news. The headlines screamed about this new war. Now, like all other wars, it is footnote, like Yemen, like Syria, like Mali, like Ethiopia, forgotten by the media, forgotten by those fortunate to live in places where bombs do not rain and where gun-wielding militia do not roam the streets. Yemen, Syria, Ukraine, Sudan. When will this end? Well, the answer is one we'd rather not hear. It will not. We cannot delude ourselves that we'll ever stop conflict, can we? There will always be those with an interest in propagating war, those for whom war and violence generate money and power. And some of these are recognizable. We see their faces in our television screens. Others are working in shadows, unseen, but their work has bitter consequences. Today, 1/4 of the global population live in conflict-affected regions. Last year, 84 million people fled their homes, and more than half of the world's refugee children do not attend school. So what can we do? Well, my friends, human beings have developed laws and doctrines to tame our baser instinct and to reflect what we know to be right, to rein in cruelty and greed. So we must use these laws. To bring criminals to account. And we must not forget the victims, those suffering in war zones or forced to become refugees. Many of them are children and young people, like Abdurrahman. Many of them have never known stability. Many of them never known peace. These children and young people have a right to education. Well, I have heard it argued that learning is the least of their worries and concerns. Well, it's not so. Let me ask a question. How many of you here are parents? Like me, didn't you begin planning for your child's education as soon as they were born? What school would they go to? And what dreams and ambitions, yours and theirs, will be realized there? Would education lead to your child being a doctor or a scientist or a politician? Well, my friends, these options are not open to so many. Their schools destroyed, their lives reduced to bare bones of surviving. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I come from a region that has its fair share of conflict, where we are aware of a deep and insidious purpose to attack our education. Perpetrators know that without learning, society does not progress. They know that if children do not acquire the critical thinking necessary to ask questions, the right questions, the status quo will continue. They know that if children have no access to quality education, they will fall prey to those who would lead them into extremism. And the cycle of ignorance is perpetuated. With quality education, would those children be the ones who discover a new drug to fight cancer, who develop new technologies to combat climate change, who expand their nation's economies to conquer poverty? Well, these battles, not those involving guns and bombs, are the battles worth fighting. These are the challenges we should teach our children to overcome. These are the reasons we must prioritize the education or the protection of education now and always. And I believe that we can break this cycle. We can find ways to educate vulnerables. We can redesign education to make learning more accessible. We can use technology to bring accelerated learning to all. And if we do so, those millions can achieve so much. So today, I call on the powerful tech companies who tell us that their products transforming our worlds and our lives for the better. I call on them to help us. I call on them to offer real solutions. I call on them to disrupt the cycle so every vulnerable child can be educated. Ladies and gentlemen, the young man killed on that campus, the campus of the University of Khartoum, a young man with his life ahead of him, a young man whose friends couldn't escape with his body, so they buried him with his dreams. That young man's name was Khalid Abdelmenam, and we will never know what he could have achieved. My friends, it's time to ask ourselves, what can we, who are here at the United Nations, what can we achieve?